Prologue. The nature of evil. The Warrens once said that demonic activity is like a disease. It finds a weakness, an entry point, and it infects. But what if that's not the whole story? What if? For decades, what we've called huntings were not random. What if these weren't isolated outbreaks of supernatural infection, but organized strikes? Coordinated, calculated. A war, fought in silence, in basements, in bedrooms, behind locked doors. And at the center of that war, one name, one commander, the entity that ties every case, every death, every nightmare together, Valak. This isn't a story of ghosts. This is a story of conquest. The story of how hell declared war on humanity, and how two people, Ed and Lorraine Warren, tried to stop it. Part 1. Genesis of a War. Every war has a beginning, the first shot. For the Warrens, it began in Harrisville, Rhode Island, a quiet farmhouse owned by the parent family. It was 1971 when the haunting began. Cold spots. Clocks stopping at 3:07 a.m. The stench of rot seeping through the walls. Then came the voices. Whispers that weren't quite human, echoing through the rafters. The family called for help, and that's when Ed and Lorraine Warren entered the story. At first, it seemed like a typical haunting, but Lorraine sensed something more, something coordinated. Every manifestation followed a pattern. Every attack was rehearsed, as if guided by command. The name Bathsheba appeared again and again. A witch who had cursed her land in 1863, sacrificing her child to Satan and hanging herself by the tree behind the house. But the truth, Bathsheba wasn't just a vengeful spirit. She was a general. Her possession of Carolyn Perrin wasn't meant to destroy one family. It was a message. A declaration of war directed at the Warrens. And Bathsheba wasn't acting alone. As Ed later theorized, Bathsheba's invocation had opened a portal, a spiritual wormhole, connecting this world to something deeper. The farmhouse wasn't just haunted. It was occupied territory. And once the Warrens banished her, something else began to stir. The demons had taken notice. Part 2. Infiltration, the doll that smiled. Every general needs soldiers. And in this war, the soldiers didn't wear armor or carry swords. They wore porcelain smiles. Enter Annabelle. To the casual observer, she was a doll, innocent, fragile. But to the Warrens, she was a weapon, a Trojan horse designed for infiltration. Two nurses, Donna and Angie, had taken her in. They weren't naive, just kind. And that kindness was the weakness the demon exploited. It began subtly. Notes that read "Help me" left in empty rooms. Scratches on the walls. Movement in the dark. When the Warrens arrived, they didn't just perform a blessing. They realized the horrifying truth. The doll wasn't haunted. It was possessed. It wasn't trying to kill. It was trying to be invited. That is the rule in demonology. A demon cannot take what it isn't given. It must be welcomed, however unknowingly. Annabelle was the perfect vessel, a test subject in psychological manipulation, and when the Warrens sealed her in that glass case, they didn't call it a trophy. They called it a containment cell, a victory. The first of many, but even victories in this war came at a price. Every artifact the Warrens collected, the cursed mirror, the music box, the wedding dress, was another battle scar, each object hummed with residual energy, waiting for orders, as if connected to a greater mind, and that mind was beginning to show itself. Part 3. Psychological warfare. The Enfield siege. By 1977, the war had moved across the ocean. In Enfield, England, the Hodgson family became the next battleground. What began as knocking on the walls soon evolved into full demonic siege. Furniture levitated. Children were thrown across rooms, and an old man, Bill Wilkins, began speaking through. 11-year-old John A. Hodgson, the world saw haunting. The Warrens saw something else. They saw pattern recognition, identical spiritual signatures echoing Bathsheba's possession and Annabel's manipulation. Lorraine's visions grew darker. She saw Ed's death. A premonition the entity used as leverage. This wasn't chaos anymore. This was strategy. It wanted to fracture them, divide their unity. Bill Wilkins, the supposed ghost, was only a puppet. Behind the puppet stood something far more sinister, a demon using grief and fear as camouflage. It was here that Lorraine first sensed it, a cold, sneering presence cloaked in the form of a nun. The demon mocked faith itself, and its name was Valak. Part 4. The commando revealed Valak's name appears in texts dating back to the 13th century, the Grand President of Hell, depicted with angelic wings, commanding 30 legions of demons. But in the Warrens' War, Valak took a new form, that of a nun, to defile the sacred. A symbol meant to break humanity's trust in holiness. Valak's goal wasn't to possess, it was to mobilize. Every haunting, every cursed object, every vision was part of a single campaign. In Amityville, Lorraine's vision of Valak after the Defio murders wasn't a coincidence. It was a signal. The opening of the Amityville house released a shockwave of spiritual energy across the world. A ripple that awakened other entities, the Crooked Man, La Llorona, the Bride in Black, all answering to one voice. Valak, he wasn't haunting one place. He was orchestrating a network, an army of the damned. And his enemies, the Warrens, were the only ones who understood the scale. Part 5. Total war from infiltration came infestation, from infestation, annihilation. Battlefield expanded. No longer confined to houses, the war seeped into objects, relics, and history itself. The Crooked Man, born from a childish nursery rhyme, was Valak's experiment in weaponized belief. If enough people feared something, it could be made real. The Lalari Mansion in New Orleans became another front. The sins of human cruelty were used as gateways, pain as portals. The rules had changed. The demons didn't need to appear. They could now inhabit memory. Every artifact in the Warrens Museum became a landmine. Every dream, a battlefield. Lorraine wrote in her diary, "The enemy has learned to adapt. It wears our faith as a mask. It infects kindness, turns love into bait, and hope into a weapon." Part 6. The Modern Front. The Devil Made Me Do It, Brookfield, Connecticut. A young man named Arn Cheyenne Johnson became the first person in U.S. history to plead not guilty by reason of demonic possession. But the truth was darker. This wasn't possession. It was transfer, during an exorcism. The demon left a boy named David Glatzel and attached itself to him through a cursed totem. The war had gone public. The enemy had adapted again, moving beyond private huntings to corrupting justice itself. When Arn murdered Alan Bono under the demon's influence, the court case became a spiritual proxy war. Human law versus infernal will. And in that trial, the Warrens realized the horrifying truth. The demons didn't just want to destroy faith. They wanted to corrupt the idea of innocence, to make us believe that evil is human, that we are the monsters. Part 7. The great deception. Valak's final strategy wasn't violence. It was doubt. If people no longer believed in good or evil, then hell wouldn't need to hide. It could walk freely among the faithless. That's why the hauntings became more public, more theatrical, more viral. Evil went mainstream. Annabelle became a museum piece. The Nun became a story. The Warrens' files became movies. But here's the secret no one talks about. The Warrens wanted the stories to spread. Because they realized something chilling. Valak feeds on fear, but it's weakened by awareness. The more people believed, the less power it held. Every case file, every interview, every film was part of a counteroffensive, a psychological war fought with faith and storytelling. That's why Lorraine kept writing, why Ed never stopped lecturing. They weren't preserving history. They were honoring humanity. Epilogue. The Museum of Silence after Ed Warren's death. Lorraine kept the museum sealed. She said she could still feel movement in the cases sometimes, especially the Annabelle case. In her final interview, she whispered something that never aired. It's not over. Evil doesn't die. It waits. It listens. Every prayer, every exorcism, it adapts. You think you're safe because the door is locked. But remember, the first door opened at midnight. The interviewer laughed nervously. Lorraine didn't. That night, the power flickered in the museum for 73 seconds. Security footage caught the sound of glass cracking. Though every case remained sealed, the lights came back on. The Annabelle doll had turned her head, just slightly, toward the camera. And in the reflection of the glass, you could see a faint silhouette of a nun standing behind her. Final note, the Conjuring universe is real if you connect the timelines. The parent case, Annabelle, Enfield, Amityville, La Llorona, and Don Johnson. The activity spikes every 6 to 7 years, like a rhythmic pulse, a breathing pattern, and if you trace the rhythm, it aligns perfectly with reports of mass possessions and disappearances from around the world. Coincidence or coordination? Maybe the Warrens weren't just fighting demons. Maybe they were delaying something far worse. Something global. Rain once wrote, "Every prayer is a battle cry, every exorcism a reprieve. The gates haven't opened yet, but the key has been forged."